Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 69, nice, of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people are making and compare them to their real-life fossil counterparts. So, today we've got a lot of remakes and remasters of a lot of older mods, which I'm really excited to get stuck into. So we're going to get started off today. We've got Gushigor, who just recently made that wonderful secretary bird for Planet Zoo. We've got him back for Jurassic World Evolution 2, making Simasukas. Got this really cute little guy here, so let's wait for a look at that little guy. Little friend. So this is Simasukas. So Simasukas is an extinct genus of crocodilian. It's in its own group called the Nosuchians. So it comes from the late Cretaceous of Madagascar. So the first specimens were found of Smilasuchus clarki, which means pug-nosed crocodile, which is a pretty funny name, I think. Was first served as the basis for an initial description in 2000. So it's about 24 years old. Including a complete skull and lower jaw, the front of the postcranial, and quite a good amount of material. And then 5 other specimens were described, so we have a pretty good idea of what it looks like. And if you've seen Prehistoric Planet Season 2, this guy was in the first episode. Love these little guys, little mascot Madagascar. There's also been many isolated teeth found part of the Mahajana Basin Project, which was directed by University de Aravano and Stockbrook University, with being found in clays and stuff within the basin deposit and river formation. So this was quite a small animal, probably about 0.75 meters, or about 2.5 feet long, based on the skeletons of mature individuals. And compared to most of the crocodiles, you can see they have quite a squat skull, where they're getting the name the pug-nosed crocodile, because they kind of look like a pug. And they also have some variation with the bony projections, things like that, that could be taken as sexual dimorphism. Also, you can see the skull is angled, so it's typically about 45 degrees from horizontal, which would have been good for grazing, as we get into. And they had teeth in their jaws that were shaped like maple leaves, which suggests that these guys were herbivores, unlike most of the crocodilians. They'd be eating a lot of plant material. But other than that, most respects, they actually are quite similar to most terrestrial crocodilians from the fossil record, though there are some differences. They have like a little bit of a bigger scapula with big, robust limbs as well. And they have a shorter tail, and on the pelvis, the ischium is spur-like, which is quite interesting as well. And like other crocodilians as well, they have osteoderms, they are covered in osteoderms. So this shield would have covered their tail, their back, and their underside, but unlike a lot of other crocodilians, they would have had them on their legs as well, and so they would have been quite spiky. So any type of predator would have to deal with those spikes to deal with them, which is quite interesting. So in terms of its classification, they're a basal group of they're basal Nodosuchian. So they're often considered closely related to Uruguayasuchus from Uruguay in the late Cretaceous and Malawi-suchus in Malawi. So there's been a little bit of research and figuring out. So Nodosuchians were a really interesting group of crocodilians that almost evolved into mammal niches. So there's one that has like very, very interesting. It has like rabbit incisors. It's called Yakani or something. Very, very interesting like experiments in crocodilian evolution. And these guys would have been quite basal, so they would have been in a clay that was back when Gondwana was still a thing. So Madagascar was still connected to Africa and Gondwana and the rest of those continents. So they would have been able to get on there. So really, really cool. Considered quite basal. Other nice examples, is, as mentioned, Yakanari, Caprasuchus is another good one, Malawi-suchus, Barasuchus, which was a one from the, I believe, from the Sebaceous was also come later, the Cenozoic, which is quite cool. So as I mentioned, it is a herbivore, most likely, and they would have been fully terrestrial and had no use tail, but no use for swimming. So they had quite also inflexible osteodome shields, so they would have probably also walked semi-erect as well, so they would have been quite well adapted for moving around on land, and quite adapted for eating plants, so quite a cool little guy in that regard. And there has been some study looking potentially they would have been burrowing or fossorial, so living underground, since they have robust limbs and a short snout, which is quite snavel-like, and things like that. Though I don't believe personally that they probably would have lived like mole rats or anything like that, or prairie. They could have definitely made burrows. Crocodilians today make burrows. So burrows is definitely within the possibility. It's just how fossorial that is, I don't really know. But I could definitely see something almost like a badger or potentially prairie dogs building a burrow and being able to hang around in there. So that's what we kind of think. And Cymosuchus, we actually don't know how Cymosuchus got to Madagascar. We think it was because it's quite basal. It would have been on Gondwana, and pretty much all Notosuchians are known from Gondwana. So it's likely they would have lived on Gondwana before it split and then evolved into all these different forms. So yeah, really, really cool in that regard. A really cool little guy. Gushigo did a wonderful job. And if you've seen Prehistoric Planet, they're with animals like Rapatosaurus, Beelzebufo, Bajungosaurus, and all those really, really cool animals. So you let them run off and do their thing. Gushigo's off with this one. So now we're going to have a look at a couple remasters by Hawk Owl 1215, some other dinosaurs that he's remade because his skills have improved greatly. We're going to have a look at Yichi. Look at this wonderful guy. Really, really cool. So this is Yichi. So Yichi is a Sanskaropterid dinosaur from the late Cretaceous of China. So it was first found by farmer Wang Zhirong in the quarry near Mojiang village in the Guangdong County of China. And then it was sold to the Zhaozhongtian Museum of Nature in 2007. And then a technician kind of looked at it, and there was lots of soft tissues preserved and things like that, and it was confirmed to be authentic specimen, so because it's so weird. Then it was described in 2015, and actually has one of the shortest dinosaur names, or the shortest dinosaur name. So Yi in its name, the genus name is Yi, which means wing, and Chi means strange, so Yi-Chi means wing strange, or strange wing, and it's actually the shortest you could make a dinosaur animal name, which is quite interesting. So the specimen itself is only known from a single partial skeleton, but it is quite complete. We have a great amount of the skull and the black bone, pelvis, and tail. So we do have quite a good idea. Also quite well preserved. We've got skin and feathers and things like that, as we'll get into. But they have very typical skulls of their relatives, like Epidemsectorix and Sascaropteryx and things like that. They had, you can see here, very, very blunt faces with teeth at the back, only at the front of the snout there. And would have been largest and kind of pointing forward, and it had long slender limbs, quite similar to other para-avian dinosaurs, like its relatives. But what really makes it weird is that it's got this kind of large styrofoam process, as you can kind of call it here. So whether this was a long pointed ring bone or like a rod of cartilage that had become calcified or turned into bone, really, really interesting, and not a lot of the dinosaurs have it. And it came from the wrist down to support, as we see this membranous windbrain, and we'll talk about that. So what we do know as well is that Yichi had a heavy covering of feathers, as they were quite advanced. They were in the clade Penaraptora, so they did have a group that had quite advanced feathers. So you can see they were very paintbrush-like, and there were some filaments. And using the relatives, some of them do have quite long tail feathers, so that was being put in Yichi as well. Quite a thick coat. And get up to about 6 centimeters long, so quite interesting as well. And also, what makes it extra weird is that they've got these small patches of wrinkled skin that have shown up. And unlike any other dinosaur, they actually had a skin membrane that formed their wing rather than feathers, like in most birds. So more similar like bats and pterosaurs and flying squirrels, they would have had a wing membrane made by skin. And you can see the styrofoam process, as I mentioned before, would have actually supported that as well. And you can see that it's actually still supported by the arm as well. So this is very much more like a bat wing or pterosaur wing than a bird wing. And it's actually a great example of convergent evolution, since these would have been quite similar to bats or flying squirrels and things like that. So it really is a great example of convergent evolution, how multiple different lineages can evolve the same thing for similar reasons, as we'll get into. And we actually do have some case of its feathers. We do have a good idea of eumelanisms, so we have the pigments kind of, so we know what general idea, colours they would have been. And as I mentioned, they're a Sanskaropterids, so they're a group of theropods in the Manuraptoran group. They would have been quite closely related to things like Epidemtosaurus and Epidemsectorix, and quite basal within the para-aves. So it's just like starting to become a little bit more bird-like. But what's really interesting is this wing. So this wing isn't like any other dinosaur we've found before, and potentially other relatives as well. But literally, we've never seen it before. It was completely like, what the heck, when we found it out. So we believe it was actually a wing, but we don't know if it was used for flying or gliding. And most research suggests that these guys may have actually may have kind of been more like gliders. They had a lower aspect ratio. So they hypothesized they were specialized for gliding flight as well. The cinematics would have been too long, but we don't know exactly. Maybe like a halfway. But it seems that these guys were either gliders or potentially weak flyers, somewhere in the middle. So maybe just had an ecology we never knew about. A great comparison people have said is like the kakapo. So the kakapo is a bird that can like climb trees, but then it can use its wings to parachute down, so it can jump down safely. It's very likely that JWE2 could have done stuff like that, potentially use its wings to help run up trees, potentially glide, and maybe weak fly other places. We really don't know. It's kind of a little bit hard, but we think it may have been using it similar gliding abilities of small mammals, so that's kind of what we think. And the results actually suggest that these guys, because they were like light gliders, they would have been more dependent on the forest. So as the forest kind of dissipated, they kind of went extinct and got outcompeted by birds, which can actually fly off the ground. So these guys required trees to like glide off. So that's kind of one of the reasons they may have gone extinct. So where it was found is from the Tirjan Formation during the Calvanian Oxfordian and the Middle Late Jurassic, so about 159 million years ago. And it's from the same formation as Epidensectorix and Sanscaropteryx, which are other Sarcopterygids, but it was a very rich ecosystem, considered tropical to temperate, subtropical to temperate, warm and humid, with all sorts of ginkgo trees and conifers and things like that. And it was found with all sorts of animals like salamanders, lots of pterosaurs, dinosaurs like Tanu Long, and birds like Cowlong and Archaeornis. It was a very rich ecosystem. So yeah, that's really, really cool. Yeah, love JWE2, another great one by Hawk. Really did a great job remastering it. Came out wonderfully. Wait, didn't I turn it off? Why are there guests when the park are closed? Anyway, guess it's a little bit weird. Anyway, we'll carry on. So we've got Archeo Osteoraptor by Hawkowl1215. So here we are. This is our Osteoraptor. And it did it again. Okay. So here is Osteoraptor. So Osteoraptor is a genus of Dromaeosaurid theropod from the Campanian to mainstream age of late Cretaceous, found in Argentina. So these type specimens of Osteoraptor calbazani is found in the Bajo Rio Serrano locality in the Allen Formation of Rio Negro in Argentina. It was first collected in 2002, and it's quite a well-described specimen. It has a skull, part of the skull, lower jaw, things like that. And then it was just prepared, and in 2008, the type species Osteoraptor calbazani was named, which means southern thief, with ostro, which means the south wind, and raptor meaning thief. And the specific name, or the species name, as calbazani, was named to honor Hector Tito Calbazar, which was one of the found at the museum where the specimen was studied. And there has been another specimen referred to this as well, and it seems to be an adult individual, just slightly smaller than the holotype, so we do have a little bit of more of a complete idea of what it was like. So it was quite a large dromaeosaur, the largest found in the southern hemisphere, and up there with the largest. So estimates put it between 5 meters to 6 meters, or 16 to 20 feet long, and between 300 and 91 kilograms. Most recent estimates put it between 91 and 227 kilograms, and about probably 5-6 meters, about 200 to 500 pounds. So what really sets it apart from a lot of other animals as well is that it's got really, really long snout. Other dromaeosaurs have typically shorter snouts. Very, very long snout with non-serrated teeth that are conical, which actually look very vaguely similar to Spinosaurids. So that's led to them potentially having the ecology of being a fish eater, like a giant heron, which is quite interesting as well. And several of the bones actually look like those of small troodontids as well, which is quite interesting. And really, really cool. So in terms of classification, they're their own group of, or own family of dromaeosaurs called the Unulagines. So there's quite a few in this group. There's Unulagia, so like Eugania and Rahanavus Buetoraptor. Also, Dakotaraptor has actually come up as a Unulagine, which is interesting. Pyroraptor as well. Hauscaraptorines, they see that are related to them as well. So very interesting taxonomy there. So they would have been kind of this group of really interesting, weird dromaeosaurs. potentially a little bit more fish eating with longer snouts, things like that. So as I mentioned, paleoecology, there has been some suggestion that these guys would have been pursuit predators because of the longer legs and able to maintain higher speeds and being more gracile. But there has been some looking at it as well, thinking these guys were quite well adapted for eating fish. So fish would have been quite a big part of their diet, and this actually helps with that kind of, you could see that quite heron-like ecology, long legs, long head, well adapted for eating fish. But like most other crocodilians and stuff that eat fish, they'll pretty much eat whatever they can get their mouths around, so they're potentially eating small dinosaurs, turtles, small reptiles, small mammals, pretty much whatever they get their mouths around like most dinosaurs would. So in terms of its paleoecology, the holotype is found in sediments from the Campanian to Maastrichtian age of the late Cretaceous, estimated between 78 to 66 million years ago, so it lived right at the end of the Mesozoic. This guy's also in Prehistoric Planet Season 2. There is an episode with Osteoraptor in it. But there's a very interesting formation, so lots of early mammals and lots of dinosaurs, like Patagonopelta, and a few others really interesting ones. So the really interesting thing about the ecology of this guy is that you could see that the Carcharodontosaurs that were a little bit earlier, like Mapusaurus and Giganotosaurus, would have already gone extinct, and things like Abelisaurs and Megaraptorans kind of took over as the dominant predators, because you have things like Maipe in the late Cretaceous as well, but also you have Carnotaurus and Cremellosaurus, which are Abelisaurids at that time. And there's lots of other large titanosaurs and theropods, Chylosaur, Patagonopelta, one of most animals in this ecology as well, so it's really, really cool. Like Bonapartosaurus, Saltosaurus is from here as well. There's also birds, all sorts of really interesting animals. So yeah, really, really cool. Do love Osteoraptor. Another great one done by Hawkowl1215. Really, really nice to see some feather mods happening. I really hope that he actually manages to remaster the feathered pack, but actually gives them proper feathers, so that would be cool if he gets a chance. So yeah, that is these guys done. So we're going back to another pack that has been lovingly remastered. So if you guys remember the Hasrock tree, he did the the Mosasaur pack. So he did a few different Mosasaurs to give them the diversity they deserve. So really, really awesome. So we're going to have a look now. So we're going to start off with Platycarpus. So I'm going to let this guy swim out and have a look in the... Yeah, we'll have a look at that bright one. He looks so cool. So look at you. So look at this wonderful guy. Actually, let him swim out a bit, I think. There we are. So this is Platycarpus. So Platycarpus is quite an interesting animal. So its name means flat wrist. So it's a genus of extinct aquatic lizards, mosasaurs, which were extinct aquatic lizards. So they lived during the 84 to 81 million years ago, during the Middle Centonian and early Campanian of the late Cretaceous. Fossils are typically found in the United States, but other specimens have been found in Belgium and Africa. So it was first described, I believe, by Cope in 1869, and it's very interesting because it has this large, long downturned tail and large lobe on it with these fins and conical teeth. And there's actually a complete specimen that shows that these guys get about 5.6 meters, or about 18 feet long. And then the platycarpine mosasaurs evolved into the very special platycarpines, which were around at the end of the Cretaceous. So the skull structure was actually quite interesting compared to a lot of other mosasaurs. They had short skulls with fewer teeth, with only about 10 in each dentary, and actually come with cycloric rings. So we have a really well-preserved specimen that has all sorts of soft tissues preserved as well, as we'll get into. So we have the tracheal rings, which are cartilaginous, preserved as well. So we have a pretty good idea of how the lungs were like. So they would have two lungs, very much like monitor lizards, unlike snakes that only have one lung, which is quite interesting as well. And skin impressions also been found, so it seems they had very much very typical scales of actually lots of reptiles and archosaurs, so like keeled scales or square hexagon scales, but they would have been much smaller on the body, so they would have very much given a smooth appearance to them, which is also really cool. Other organs have been found as well. They actually have some similarities. They evolve some similarities with whales and dolphins, which is quite interesting. So the position of the kidneys is actually more similar to that of whales than other monitor lizards, which are their modern relatives. But also we found like parts of their digestive tract, seeing what they're eating. So these guys would have been eating a lot of like softer foods, and there's actually globidens, which we'll talk about next, which ate a lot of bivalves and things like that. And what really changed a lot of what we perceived of mosasaurs, we can see this downturned fluke here. We originally thought mosasaurs were very much eel-like and swam like eels, but turns out during the soft tissue of platycarpus showed that these guys had downturned dorsal fins or like tail fins or caudal fins, very much like sharks and ichthyosaurs and whales today. So very, very interesting what just skin impression can show us about these guys. So we learned a lot from that one. So there's been lots of different fossils found around Kansas, things like that, and there's been lots of different species described, lots of them lumped. The species that we use here is just Platycarpus temperanus, which is the original one, but there's been other that have been split into different species, things like that. But yeah, these guys didn't have quite the robust teeth of most of the mosasaurs, so these guys may have been well adapted for smaller or softer prey, such as small fish and squid. And while mosasaurs traditionally propelled themselves through the water, they believed it, as I mentioned, like that. They actually had a fluke, and they had the sibylla ligaments. They would have swam using their long tail, very much like a shark. And the small scales actually would have helped them swim since they would have been hydrodynamic and stiffer. It allowed them to move, and even more derived mosasaurs had even smaller scales, so they would have been able to more efficiently move through the water. And really interesting as well, we can see that we actually have a dorsal fin, like a whale, on this Platycarpus. And if you said this to me like 2 months ago, I said, no, there's no evidence for dorsal fins. But there was actually a recent mosasaur, different species, a mosasaurian mosasaur, called, from the late Cretaceous from Japan, which is called Megapterus mariensis, if you say that. They actually show evidence of a dorsal fin. So this kind of the vertebrae actually suggest that they would have held a dorsal fin, very convergent with cetaceans, which have sometimes quite big dorsal fins. So we actually do have evidence that at least this mosasaur species, and potentially a lot of later mosasaurs, may have had dorsal fins. So it's very likely that, potentially early in their evolution they may have had some. So it's not quite as speculative as we thought. So really, really cool. And now we have some evidence of that, which is always really awesome. So we'll let you swim off and do your thing. We always love that. So next up, we've got, as I mentioned, we've got a little bigger relative, we've got globidens. Have a look at you. I like this color of this one here. So this is globidens, another favorite. So globidens is another mosasaur as well. It's from its own group called the Globosaurini, and part of a mosasaurine group. So a little bit closer related to things like Mosasaurus. So the first specimen was described in 1912 by Charles W. Gilmore, which was used from basal specimen. There's Alabamaensis, but there's also Dakotaensis. There's quite a few species described. Some have been lumped, and I can imagine some will be lumped in the future or split in their own genera. I'm not going to go quite into the taxonomy there. But these guys were relatively medium-sized mosasaurs, so they get about 5 to 6 meters long, or about 16 to 20 feet, and was similar to appearance with most of the mosasaurs, like the streamlined body, powerful jaws, and flattened tail. But what really set them apart was their teeth, as the term globidens actually refers to globular teeth, because if you can see their teeth in there, they've got very big round teeth. So this actually gives away to what they were eating. It seems that these guys were very durophagous, or very hard shell eating species. So we actually have coprolites that are feeding on big clams and bivalves, but also they would have been eating sea turtles, ammonites, a lot of really hard shelled animals within the ecosystem. So that shows that they were well adapted for crushing animals like that, which is really, really interesting. And that kind of shows that all the different ecologies that they were looking into as well, which is quite cool. As I mentioned, they are kind of more basal into Mosasaurini, and they actually live in their tribe. They have the tribe Globidenzini, which has the genus Caridens as well, which is considered their sister taxon. A little bit neither here nor there, so they were quite basal. They were before the split of the Mosasaurini, which has like Mosasaurus and Plottosaurus and things like that. Yeah, really, really interesting animal regardless. So as I mentioned, they would have been uniquely adapted for eating those hard-shelled foods. They would have been rather for crushing rather than piercing or tearing flesh. And there has been stomach contents found with clams and also coprolites with all sorts of clams and things like that. That shows that these guys were well adapted for eating hard-shelled foods. So in terms of their ecologies, these guys probably lived in warm, shallow waters. They're most well known from the Western Interior Seaway of the late Cretaceous, but fossils of these guys have been found in Western Africa and also found in the Middle East and South America as well. So it's very likely they were a globe-trotting genus with potentially a few different species, but a lot of them are not based on too well fossils. So it'd be interesting to see how that'll change in the future. Yeah, really, really cool animal. Definitely a big fan of the globidens. So really, really awesome. So we're going to let you swim off and do your thing. So next up, another one done for the Mosasaur pack, we have got Kaikaifalu. So we'll have a look. Where's this other one in the corner there? Love to look at you because you look quite nice. I like the color of this one. So this is Kaikaifalu. Very, very interesting animal. So Kaikaifalu is a mosasaur, considered a tylosaurine, but there is some research suggests that it may actually just be a mosasaurine. These guys are a large genus of mosasaur that lived right at the end of the Maastrichtian. They were in Prehistoric Planet Season 1. They chased the curve of Tyrannosaurus. So they lived in what was now northern Antarctica. So the only species known is Kaikaifalu hervey, which was described in 2017. Was an incomplete specimen found in the Lopez de Badino Formation on Seymour Island, which is really interesting. So reconstructions of the skull suggest that these guys got about 1.1 to 1.2 meter long skulls, which means they could have been about 10 meters long, which makes it the largest mosasaur from the southern hemisphere and one of the largest tylosaurs to date, which is quite interesting. Another way you can tell them apart, they have heterodont teeth, so they have different types of teeth, which is typically not found in other tylosaurines, which is interesting. So the only known specimen, as I mentioned, was found in 2011 by the Chilean paleontological expedition in the upper Maastrichtian bed of the Lopez del Baladino Formation on Seymour Island, which is on the Antarctica Peninsula. The fossil material is a skull, jawbone, isolated teeth, and a humerus. And osteogenic analysis suggests that this is an adult. And there's been lots of people who originally described it as a tylosaurine, but there has been some, they're not certain whether it is a tylosaurine or a mosasaurine or potentially indeterminate or in between, and it was described as Kaikaifalu havani in 2017. So Kaikaifalu itself comes from the Mandipurian itself, and is a reference to Koi Koi Valu, which is a reptilian deity from the cosmology of that, and the scientific name or the species name is Havani, which is from Francesco Havani, which was a Chilean geologist who was quite important to the geology of Chile and the Antarctica Peninsula. So quite important to research in that area. So Kaikaifalu, as I mentioned, the holotype itself is about 70 centimeters long, but then reconstructed about 1.2 meters or 47 inches. So it suggests that one of the largest tylosaurines at about 10 meters. And the anatomy is poorly preserved. Most of it's kind of estimated from other ones, but they did have heterodont teeth, which is really interesting. So they had fully developed teeth at different parts of the jaw. So some were more conical, some actually curved slightly backwards, with about 4 different types of teeth along the jaw, with some being like medium size, some big size. So a really, really interesting feature. It's only seen on one other mosasaur, which is Omanisaurus, which comes from Morocco. So it seems that later mosasaurs definitely probably had different types of teeth as well, which is quite cool. So as I mentioned, it is considered a tylosaurine at the moment, but we don't really know. There's been some debate whether it's a mosasaurine and tylosaurine. And it was found, as I mentioned, from paleoecology for after Maastrichtian, so right at the end of the age of dinosaurs, found in made up of like 1,000 meters of salt and things like that, sandstone, things like that, where it was found. In terms of its formation, it's actually known as other mosasaurs such as Moanosaurus, Mosasaurus, Pliobadocarpus, and Lygodon, and some other tylosaurine remains. And there's also globidens and prognathodon also suggested to be there as well. But there's other Antarctic marine reptiles included, like elasmosaurs like Montanura, Astronectes, also some other things would have been potential prey, lots of large ammonites and codas, things like that. So it would have been a very rich formation, and it was actually quite cold as well. So temperatures were about, because it was a lot more south than today, so temperatures would have been an average about 6 degrees or 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and would have dropped below freezing during the winter with sea ice as well. So these guys would have been most likely warm-blooded to live in those really cold habitats. So it wasn't as cold as it was today, but still very cold, especially for a cold-blooded reptile, so it's most likely they were warm-blooded. But yeah, that's Kaikaifalu finished. So we're going to have a look at the last animal from this pack. We've got Prognathodon. So this is a big cool one. Look at this guy. Let's have a look at you. So this is Prognathodon. This is Salvatore. So Prognathodon is a extinct genus of mosasaur that came from Mosasaurine. So it's related to Clydestes and Mosasaurus. It is a very wide-ranging genus. So it's found from the Campania Maastrichtian from the Middle East, New Zealand, Europe, and North America. So found pretty much worldwide. So in terms of its name, Prognathodon means four-jaw tooth, which comes from pro, which means earlier. Gnathus means jaw, and odon means tooth, which is things. There's about 12 species named across the world, but sometimes there's not really clear differences between them. It's sometimes hard to tell. So some species have been assigned to other genera, some will be lumped. It's just kind of taxonomy being taxonomy, but they are known from all over the world. So the first described in 1889 in Belgium, where they were given that name. And then it was later used by Day Russell in a monograph. And then there's been lots of different specimens found, especially some found in like Canada. And over history, there's been quite a few found. So Prognathodon are considered one of the larger mosasaurs, with the largest known skull being about 1.4 meters, or about 4 foot 6 inches. 4 feet 6 inches, yeah, or 4.6 feet long. So, despite their massive size, though, they're often in fragmentary, and there's a lot of range of different species. So, some species were quite big. Sagittoro was about 12 meters long, estimated. Some were about 6 meters, so range from mid-size to quite big. So, lots of variation within there. But one thing that you can all tell Prognathodons apart, they had quite thick skulls, quite robust. So, they were quite well adapted for eating harder shell prey. They were kind of like in between your typical mosasaur and like Lobodens, so they were probably well adapted for eating large animals, potentially had bigger animals that are kind of harder, so like sea turtles, plesiosaurs, large fish, so pretty much whatever get their mouths around, which is quite interesting. That's where they're kind of known for their... And some estimates on their bite forces is suggested to be like under a ton or potentially like over a ton, or about like 10,000 newtons, so quite powerful. So, which is quite interesting, especially for the larger ones. And there are lots of different teeth in terms of dentition, so a lot of them have very different teeth. Prognathodon actually is a relatively small number of teeth for a mosasaur, which is quite interesting. And we do have a lot of soft tissue from these guys as well. We know that they had that big tail fluke, very much like ichthyosaurs and other mosasaurs and whales and things like that, so not too different there. And we also showed that there was scales very similar to Platycarpus, and lots of soft tissue actually suggests that these guys would have tail fin would actually grown to account for the size of larger individuals. So different species or potentially different individuals of the same species just growing up. So older ones would have larger fins compared to smaller individuals, which is quite cool. So as I mentioned, there's about 12 different species. They are related to the Mosasaurine subfamily, so they're related to like things like they're believed to be a Playa platycarpine originally, but now they're related to things like Mosasaurus, Clydestes, things like that. So more closely related to your typical mosasaurs. And some are actually more closer to mosasaurs than others, Mosasaurini as others, which is quite interesting. And there's about 12 different species. This one is Salvadori, which is kind of the biggest, most famous one. And it is kind of disputed. Some have suggested it's a different one. This one was found in the Netherlands in about 2002 and was the first originally complete mosasaur from the Maastricht since 1957. And one of the distinguishing traits is it's much bigger, and it's a little bit later as well, so it was a latest Cretaceous big one. And the robustness of the bones suggests that these guys would have been feeding upon large sea turtles, but potentially just other big prey like ammonites, things like that, so well adapted for eating big things. So we have found stomach contents and poos from a lot of these guys. It suggests that these guys would have an ecology very similar to killer whales. So they were potentially eating lots of fish, sea turtles and cephalopods, eating on big things. Especially like Salvatore was kind of like a in-between with the globidens and, the typical cutting teeth of mosasaurs, like Mosasaurus. So they potentially would have had very big teeth, well adapted for eating harder prey. So kind of like in between, but just not quite as specially adapted. So really well adapted to eating big things. So yeah, really, really cool. So we're going to let you swim off and do your thing. How awesome. So that mod, the Platycarpus, Globidens, Kaikaifalu, and Prognathodon were all done by Husqvarna Tree, who did a really wonderful job remaking it for us, because the original one did have some issues, but now it's like pretty much perfect now, and really awesome. And it was cool to incorporate some new stuff to come into it as well. So like the dorsal fins, now we actually have some evidence of that. So that's cool. Definitely a big fan. So next up, we've got by Netraptor and Castle Log, we've got Scorpio Venator. Really interesting animals. So let's have a look. Let's have a look at Scorpio Venator. Have a look at you. So Scorpio Venator is a very interesting abalisaurid. So these guys come from the late Cretaceous of the Huinku Formation, so Cenomania tenorian. So they lived in the same place with like Giganotosaurus and Mapusaurus and Argentinosaurus. Very cool as well. And actually one of the most well-known, complete, and informative abelisaurs yet known from a nearly complete skeleton. So it's really cool. So the estimated size of an adult one would have been about 6 to 6.2 meters long, so about 19 to 20 feet, and had short, stubby, near useless arms, very similar to other abelisaurs, with strong legs and powerful thighs, and skirty shins over which their large body would have been balanced. Also, very likely had lots of little. There was originally believed to be osteoderms, but there's recent evidence with Carnotaurus it would have been just like slabs of skin, would be able to adapt it to keep them cool. So one of the really interesting characteristics, though, is the skull. So the skull was quite short and stout and covered in ridges and furrows, very typical of most abelisaurids. And it was very much shorter, craniocaudally, so that means the back of the skull was short, very similar to Carnotaurus, but shorter and deeper than animals such as Abelisaurus and Majungasaurus. So they actually defined a clade called Brachyrostro, which means short snouts. It includes Carnotaurus, Acrosaurus, and Isolechia and Ursosaurus, which were other species which defined by their smaller skulls. So the type specimen itself was named by Kali Savasho Alagonin in Novas in 2009, and the name means Scorpio Venator bustangori, which is described in Greek and Latin for scorpion hunter, which is due to the abundant amount of scorpions to the dig site. And the scientific name, or the species name, honors Manuel Bishagori, who actually owned the farm where it was found. And as mentioned, they defined a new clade. It's known from a single specimen, and is known from the Huinku Formation of Patagonia. The specimen is actually only missing parts of its tail and the majority of the forelimbs, so not missing too much. And the specimen was recovered from the Huinku Formation of Patagonia, and it would have lived with animals like Mapusaurus and Argentinosaurus and things like that. So really cool. Yeah, another really cool one. Netraptor doing another wonderful job. I love seeing some more Netraptor mods, and Castle Log doing a great job porting it for him. Really cool. Nice to see Scorpio Venator. Awesome. So last but certainly not least, we've got done by Master Doot. We've got another returning one, all done by itself with some new animations. We have got Dinosaurs. So it's very cool, isn't he? So we'll have a look. So this is come with the special skins. So this is the melanistic one, albino, and the alligator one. So this one just looks like a normal alligator, American alligator. So we're going to let them walk around because I want to show you some of the unique animations they have. So Dinosaurs, which means terrible crocodile, they're a genus of extinct alligatoroid crocodilians. So they're closely related to modern caimans and alligators. They lived between 82 to 73 million years ago during the late Cretaceous, and its name translates to terrible crocodile. So the first remains were discovered in North Carolina in the 1850s, and the genus was then named and described in 1909. And then initial fragments and new species have been actually found since the 1940s, so we do have a pretty good understanding. We actually have a few different species described of Dinosaurs. So as I mentioned, it was first discovered in 1858, and then it was described as Polycodon, which is a genus of crocodilian reptiles. But then it was not considered kind of diagnostics, so then it was named a new species, Dinosaurs rugos. So that was the first one found. And there's been other species described, like Hatcherai, and then recently in 2020 there was Swimmeri. But it's kind of hard because it's, taxonomy being taxonomy, kind of what's true or not. But we definitely know they were in the member Alligatorsaurid, Sauria, so they were related to other like American alligators, quite similar in that regard. And there has been some differences as well. Main difference between like Hatcheri and Rugoriensis is the shape of the osteoderms and teeth. Some are a little bit older, some a bit younger, and the one that mentioned new one, Strumisheri, was from Appalachia, which is another way to tell them apart. So there's a few different differences. Here's one of the animations as well. Oh, this is kind of the social one, but I want to show you one that was sleeping. But they've got a very interesting morphology. So very much like the large, due to their large size, they were not actually that different considering compared to modern crocodilians. They just looked like a normal crocodile today, just much bigger. They had a very alligator-like snout, but there was some differences. They almost were like a halfway between a crocodile and an alligator, potentially because of ecology, since they were eating quite a bit larger prey than alligators would, comparatively. So each maxillary has about 21 to 22 teeth, and most of the teeth very much like crocodilians today. You can see he's doing the new animation. So only the bottom four here would have been shown off, but most of the time crocodilians only show their top jaw teeth off, but these guys would have had some coming off. So they had a unique shape to their skull that was quite unlike any other crocodilians today. So it's very much probably really robust and long to have like that in-between between crocodiles and alligators, which is quite interesting. So modern crocodilians, like the saltwater crocodile, has the strongest bite force today of living animal recorded. So a 4.5 meter long crocodile has a bite force of about 1,600 kilograms, or about 16,000 newtons. And so scale it up to Dinosaurs, it suggests that they could have one that was just under 2 tons, so it'd be like a truck parking on you. But considering it's just a scaled up saltwater crocodile, it may be a little bit stronger, a little bit weaker, depending on a couple of things, which is quite interesting. So Dinosaurs as well has some osteoderms, and actually had quite unusually big and heavy osteoderms. And they're deeply pitted as well, so these would have been good attachment points for connective tissue. And they would have been able to serve as load-bearing to take the load of their weight when they were walking, since they were much heavier than modern crocodiles. And they suggest that these guys were actually well adapted for walking on land, much like modern crocodiles, so they would have been able to walk around, potentially even high walk. So in terms of its size, there's been lots of looking into their size and lots of estimates. Some actually, the most first estimate suggested these guys had a 1.5 meter skull and a lower jaw of 1.8 meters. And it suggests that they would have been proportions similar to a Cuban crocodile, which has a famously kind of small skull for its size, about 15 meters long, but that's considered inaccurate. Most recent estimates recently have put between the most recent ones for different species about 8 to 10 meters long, to about 2.5 metric tons. There is believed to be one big individual that was about 12 meters long and about 8.5 metric tons, so it's very possible they got quite big. And they were up there with like Sarcosuchus, Perusaurus, Gyptosaurus, and Rumphosuchus with some of the larger crocodilians. So there wasn't really a biggest crocodilians, but there was lots of them throughout history from the Cretaceous right up to the Cenozoic and up to today that could have like competed for that biggest crocodile. So there were a lot of crocodiles very similar in size throughout history. So in terms of its diet, they would have been on that seafood diet. They eat it. And most research suggests there's actually bite marks and hadrosaur bones that were actually from Dinosaurs. So these guys are very likely eating hadrosaur dinosaurs. So very similar to how crocodilians and stuff will hunt wildebeest and buffalo today. They would have likely grabbed them, pull them in the water to drown them, and then done the death roll to break them apart. So they probably would have eaten them when they had the chance, but they also would have eaten fish and marine turtles, as alligators are actually quite well adapted for eating types of turtles, so they probably would have done that as well. They would eat whatever they get around. So marine turtles, large fish, and smaller dinosaurs would have been quite common in their diet. There's also been some research on their growth rates. So it actually suggests that these guys didn't actually grow much faster than normal crocodilians, but they just grew much quicker, much longer. So it would have taken Dinosaurs about 35 years to reach adult size, and the oldest individuals would have been 50 plus. So they would have been able to reach their size. They just didn't grow as fast as normal crocodilians. They just would have grown for longer. So, which is quite interesting as well. And you can kind of see the same sort of patterns that you get. They get the same sort of patterns you get in modern crocodilians. So you can look at the growth rings and see when they were eating different growth cycles, things like that. But they may have actually grown. There's some evidence that they may have actually grown a little bit faster than modern crocodilians and had a similar lifespan of about 100 years. So it's a little bit of just depending on how you interpret it, and obviously science is a little bit different each way. But in terms of paleoecology, these guys were present on both sides of the West Interior Seaway, which was a big seaway which divided America in half during the late Cretaceous. And they've been found in the states such as Utah, Montana, Wyoming, New Mexico, Jersey, Alabama, Missouri, Texas, places like that. And there's been other places they've found them. There's even northern Mexico, and there's possible one from Colorado. But they would have lived on both sides of them. And people are curious how they got there. So the distribution suggests that these guys may have actually preferred estuarine environments, with the largest specimens actually being found in brackish waters. And most crocodilians, like saltwater crocodiles, have been known to do this. And alligators today, which are their closest relatives, can hang out in brackish waters from time to time. But they may not have been as well adapted as modern saltwater crocodiles, but possibly they could have. The salt glands are not that don't preserve, so we really don't know. But they would have been quite able. They would have been very able to swim across the West Interior Seaway and occupy those brackish habitats. So yeah, it's really cool. We're going to have a look. So this is the land version. So this comes in two versions that Master Duke made. So this is the land one, based off Dimetrodon. And then you have here, this is the lagoon one. So this is the one lagoon. So let's watch it have a wonderful swim. So this one is based on Dunkleosteus swimming around. But you don't get the special skins, as I mentioned, like the albino and the melanistic one. But you do get the kind of same variety of skins, which all look pretty good. I quite like that lighter one there. But yeah, really awesome mod. I think Master Duke really did a wonderful job. So, yeah, I think this is a great job. Thank you for Netraptor and Master Duke and Hawkowl and Gushy and everyone that made these really, really wonderful mods. Husrock Tree as well for remaking the Mosasaur pack. Really, really awesome. So, yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to click the bell icon to get notified below anything. So, yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.